Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education. Featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. Make sure you join our community. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, YouTube. Just type Prepped and Polished and you will arrive. You can go to preppedandpolished.com for more info and to sign up for our 1-hour SAT Strategies course, SAT Strategy Secrets. I teach the course. It's fun, it's engaging, it's informative, it's free. preppedandpolished.com, and you can sign up for our free SAT course. Have a question or reaction during or after the podcast, submit your question to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Let's get to today's guest. Today's guest is Elizabeth Dankoski. For the past 15 years, Elizabeth has worked as a private college consultant, helping students get into incredible schools: Harvard, MIT, Columbia, Yale, Caltech, Dartmouth, and many, many others. Elizabeth has a bachelor's from Wellesley College, which is right down the street from Prepped and Polished, literally 1 mile away. And she graduated magna cum laude. Elizabeth is founder of the Dream School Project, a powerful mentoring program created for high-achieving high school students who want to get into the school of their dreams. Elizabeth created the Dream School Project as an antidote to all the anxiety and stress around the college admissions process, and we talk about that a lot today. On today's episode, Elizabeth gives her take on the college admissions mania and, based on her experience, what it really takes to get into elite schools. So let's get right to our interview. It's super informative. You might have to listen twice. This is episode number 94 with Dream School Project's Elizabeth Dankoski. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. Good to be here. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. Thank you. So let's start off. Can you share with us some pivotal life moments that brings you here with us today, really as a college coach and mentor for teens?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I had been when I was a student at Wellesley College, I was a writing tutor there, and a parent called and was looking for a writing tutor for their 8-year-old son, who was doing high school level math at that point, and she wanted someone to kind of balance out his writing skills with his math skills. And from there, her neighbors and her friends started calling me, and I just started, it was fun. I started just doing kind of general writing tutoring, and then people asked me to do SAT prep, and then of course it just carried over into doing college applications, and soon that was primarily what I was doing, just the college application piece, and I loved it, primarily because it was a storytelling venue, but also because I got to hear the students' stories in a way that I never got to when I just focused on, are you writing a good thesis, or, how do you put the comma here, or whatever. I really loved that I got to know the students in a way that I didn't get to with my other work. And then about 4 years ago, I had an unusually big class of students that I was working with for college applications, and they were extraordinary kids, kind of off the charts with their grades and test scores and extracurriculars. And I was so excited for March to come out. I was like, all right, this is going to be great. So many kids are going to get accepted to these amazing schools. And the results came out, and some of them did get into extraordinary schools, but a number of them got waitlisted. And I was like, what? Wait a minute, what just happened? And I was, of course, self-taught. I didn't really know the college industry, really, and I just thought I knew what I needed to know. And kids would come to me and say, okay, let's get really good, strong test scores, and let's write these beautiful essays. And I thought they had everything they needed. And that was a turning point for me, because then I read that after, when I was waiting for the test, or I guess those results came in, and I remember sitting on the couch that May, it was, kind of trying to make sense of all of this, and reading this book by Cal Newport called How to Be a High School Superstar. And his whole argument is that you don't need perfect grades and test scores you need to be interesting. And it was like this huge light bulb went off. It wasn't that these kids weren't interesting. It's just that at this level, at this very, very high level, and they were all applying to, the Ivy League level schools, they all looked the same. And in fact, they were kind of average among the pool. And it was shocking to me because I was in awe of these kids. They were so much more accomplished than I felt like I was in high school, right? And now here they were finding out that they were considered average. And I thought, oh my God, okay, we got to do something about this. And so the wheels started churning and churning. And that was a turning point. That's when I realized, okay, I can't just tell them to do all of the sort of typical stuff anymore. I have to ask them brand new questions. And that's what brings me to do my work today, which is where I really think of myself as a mentor to my students, not just an SAT guide or a college counselor, but a mentor. A little more
powerful.
I can do so much more with my students, when I think of myself that way. Yeah.
That's really amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about the Dream School project that you started, and how did this evolve?
Yeah, so this was, I ran the Dream School project. It was actually called the Innovation Project when I first started it, but some people said to me, what is innovation? What does that have to do with college? And I said, okay, let's call it the Dream School Project so that we know what we're talking about just in the title. And basically, this is a mentoring program. It's the first one I ran was a 4-week program. I ran the first one in March, last year, and I'm running another one again at the beginning of next year after I get through this college application season. And the goal is, in the 6 weeks, the heart of the program is creating this incredible project, figuring out what you love. Maybe that's a strong word for some kids. So what you're interested in or what you're curious about, and what kind of impact you want to make, where you can take your natural talents and your natural interests and curiosities and benefit others around you. So what I'm always trying to do is help kids think about how they can go beyond just sort of what's given to them. There's a lot of fantastic extracurriculars they can plug into. But the minute they put themselves in that position of, what do I want to do and what kind of impact do I want to make? It's a very different approach, even if you're still within one of your extracurriculars, up at school. So I'm always looking for where kids can kind of come alive, where they can do something that's different from kind of the rest of what they're doing and what everyone else is doing. And that really is showcasing their particular interests and skills, and some kids are going to be really passionate. Other kids are going to be like, what's passion? I don't know what that is. And so it's just, what do you like? What do you care about? Who needs something around you that you feel that you could give and provide and make the world better around you? And the first one I did was extraordinary. I had an incredible time doing it. And there's one student I'm in touch with she's creating a foundation, a nonprofit foundation. She's very interested in becoming an attorney and working in law enforcement. And she's creating a nonprofit to support underprivileged kids to get into a college that will help them, get the education that they need. She has Sandra Day O'Connor as a potential backer, and they're directly contributing the success of this program to what she learned in this program. So I'm not saying every kid who comes through my program is going to get Sandra Day O'Connor, but the fact that came out of just the first time I did this was so humbling and so gratifying. And I'm going to be talking to the parents this week just to hear more about what she's doing, because it's so interesting.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So I would imagine that you have a ton of resources, at your fingertips. You just know a lot about, different opportunities available for these kids.
Yes. Part of it is, a big piece of what we do in the program is talking about mentoring. There's a lot of information out there about how mentors can connect with teens, but there's almost no information out there about how teens can connect with mentors. And so I created it for them. That's a whole module that we do in this 6-week course. Is just, we spend 1 week just talking about how do you find a mentor, how do you approach a mentor, how do you sustain a relationship with a mentor, how do you show up in that relationship, what does that even look like? Because most people have no idea. I mean, I certainly didn't know how to do that when I was a teenager. It's not something I even knew how to do as an adult. And so when I really started kind of going through the literature on mentorship, I was like, well, we need this stuff for teens. They need to know this, because what I'm finding is that having a mentor it can just fuel you in a way that you could never imagine. I mean, I think all of us as adults know, we think back to the people who've been mentors in our lives and we think, oh my God, I wouldn't be where I am today without those people, right? Yeah. And I know for me, even continuing in my business today, I'm always partnering with mentors so that I can keep growing and keep giving the best opportunities to my students. And I credit my work with those mentors, you know, to what my work with them, to what I can pass on to my students. So I think teens awesome. Really early. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of mentors. Now, how does one sign up for the Dream School project? So, and you have a mastermind.
I do. I have a number of programs right now.
Number of programs.
So the Dream School project is the 6-week program where it's all about what's your project and how do you partner with a mentor to get this project to a really high level, and time management and some what I call brain hacks, which is kind of getting the stress level down, you know, so you can even think straight to even think about what your project is, and just things like that, kind of thinking through what you want your trajectory through high school to be. Most people don't set out to make it be a hamster wheel, but that's often what it ends up being. So we take a very pragmatic approach to how we want to kind of, you know, target what we're really ultimately trying to do. And so right now the sign up will be available through my website. I'm actually my developer and my designer are just finishing a couple things so we can get it up on the website. But right now what we can do is have people go to my website, elizabethdankoski.com, and they can just send me a note and say, I want to be on your list to so that when you open up the doors in early next year, I can get more information, and that way I can just put them right into the list. Within just a few days, that will be up on my website. So hopefully maybe by the time this airs, that will be ready. And in the mastermind, right now, that is a small group of 5 students where we write the top 4 essays for the college applications. Okay. So it's an opportunity, you know, it's really just for seniors. And I'm running the first one right now, and it's amazing. I had my second class with them last night. These essays are unbelievable. I was actually choking up at one of the students' stories last night because it was so beautiful, and she was just finding a way to articulate it in a way that was so moving. And I really had to kind of compose myself. So I'm loving this work because I get to work with even more students in this group setting, but it's small enough that each of them gets one-on-one time with me as well, and they're learning from each other. You know, as I give comments on the essays, they're learning like, oh, okay, we need more detail. That's right. Or we need to think about the arc of our essay, or, you know, something like
awesome.
That. Yeah, I think it's a really good model. I've been so pleased with how it's going.
Perfect. So you and I had a conversation recently, and one thing that struck me is that you mentioned that, you know, you've had students with straight A's, you've seen students with straight A's, top scores, get rejected from Ivy League schools, but then students without straight A's can get in to great schools. So how does this happen?
Yeah, this was the big mystery for me, and it's the thing I finally felt like I unraveled for myself a few years ago. And I think it really comes down to this whole idea of how are you differentiating yourself? So if you have perfect grades and perfect test scores and all the usual extracurriculars, you're really not standing out when you're in these very competitive pools. You know, if we think about Stanford and Harvard, who have 5-point-something acceptance rates, it's wild, right? And so they get to kind of just say, well, who's someone who's doing something really unusual or different, or what's standing out? Like the grades and the test scores are sort of just the foundation to get your foot in the door. And that's why I never focus on perfection with my students, because first of all, it's a losing game. it's really hard to deal with perfection, and the more perfection you aim for, the more stress you have to deal with. I'm not saying you don't need good grades and good test scores to get into these schools. Of course, they need to be in range, but they don't have to be perfect. And I had a student, for example, come to me last December who had gotten deferred at Cornell, at the School of Engineering. That was his top choice school. And he had kind of okay grade, he had strong grades and okay SAT scores. The SAT scores were not, I think it was like a 2100 or something. Right. So in range for the school, but not like off the charts, certainly not a perfect score. And he had gotten deferred, so he was wondering what he could do to really stand out in the regular pool and what he could do for the regular decision schools. So we worked on I looked at his essay, and it was very well written, but it didn't tell me anything really personal about him. So I had him write a new essay that was much more personal, and I had him send it in the form of a letter to say I didn't really fully articulate myself in this first essay, and I wanted to really let you see who I am. It was a beautiful essay, and it was all about how he was a connector, and he had been someone who was a misfit as a freshman in high school, and then he never forgot that experience. So when he went into robotics, he was always the guy kind of turning around and saying, hey, do you know what's going on here? What's your idea? And always including other people. It was really, and he was very mindful about it. It was something he really consciously thought about. And I said, you have to tell that story. You're applying to the School of Engineering. Like, how many engineers are talking about being connectors? That's not a typical engineer's story, right? Yeah. And so he told that story, and then this spring he got into both MIT and Cornell. And so to me this is what, and it wasn't like he had done something extraordinary, like created a nonprofit and with Sandra Day O'Connor. He had been in robotics, he had been a connector, and he had had quite an intensive involvement in the farmers market and had created an app for that. So he had showed himself as a leader in a quiet way. It wasn't like he was going out and curing cancer or something, kind of, we think we have to be geniuses to get into these schools. But what he did was, we thought about, where is he applying and how can you distinguish yourself among this pool, right? So for if he had been applying, let's just say, to like a Dartmouth or a Brown type of school, which is a more liberal arts kind of a broader focus than the engineering school, we might have told a similar essay, but we might have emphasized something else more that is going to distinguish him, right? Like, we might have emphasized more the programming piece for that, in combination with this more compassionate, connected side. So I think it's about figuring out who your audience is, partly for the essays, but also before you even get to the essays, it's figuring out, what do you have that distinguishes you from other people, and how can you articulate that? And that's where those essays come in. How can you articulate your difference? That's amazing.
And so note to self that if you want to get off of a deferment, try to find your own voice, try to articulate it. But now these college admissions officers are so busy, so they're actually reading these essays.
This is not the first time this has happened for me, with my students at all. And yes, they read them. I mean, it's important. It's really important. And if you take the time to write a letter and you show that you've really put in time to write a new essay, if the first one you sent in wasn't, as strong as you thought it could be, or someone tells you, it's not as personal as we need it to be, or whatever, and you write a new essay and it really lets them see who you are and what you're going to be contributing to their college, they're going to read it. They really are. Yeah, they're busy, but I mean, they want the right people at their schools. They want the right
people. They don't want you begging in your essay, please let me in.
No, that's very undignified. What they want is this sort of balance between confidence and in knowledge about the school, and then also just kind of they want to like you. So that's where the essay comes in. They want to be rooting for you. Like, oh, it's so great that you accomplished that, and you learned this, and you've changed, and you've transformed, and
definitely. Now, how can a perfect transcript, perfect grades, perfect test scores perfect letters of recommendation backfire on you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's connected back to the idea of the perfection model. You know, the thing is, if you're so focused on perfection, you don't have time to focus on how you're distinguishing yourself. So you're putting all of your energy into trying to distinguish yourself through your grades and your test scores and your extracurricular activities, but you haven't necessarily thought about how is someone going to see me in the pool of everyone else who has perfect grades and test scores and all of these similar activities. Right. So always the first question should be, what do I love? Or if that's too strong a question, what am I interested in? What would I like to learn more about? What am I curious about? Where do I want to make an impact? And the thing that I'm really passionate about is that so many kids come to me and they say, I don't see the purpose of all this stuff we're doing in school. Right, and I just say, yeah, me neither. I mean, I'm kind of a rogue college consultant that way, because I don't tell them to just buckle down. I tell them, right. What do you love? What are you interested in? Because the minute someone turns on and has this sense of I can see that what I'm doing can influence someone's life for the better, which you don't get that opportunity when you're in high school, or really in any grade. You know, you are just studying and getting your grades, and that's the end. You know, yeah. Don't in the traditional, typical public school, or even a lot of private schools, you don't get that sense of what you're doing impacts somebody else. And I always want students to have that experience, because that's so empowering. You know, when I know for me, I was kind of lost and didn't really know what was going on in high school. But when I found, whenever I did, it wasn't just until I did my work with my students, whenever I found that I was making an impact on someone else, I wanted to keep going. It was so inspiring. That's what made me passionate, was how am I impacting someone else? So it's like a dual-edged sword, you know, like what do I love and how can I help?
That's amazing.
And combining those two. Yeah.
So can you give us maybe a couple, two, three things that you might want to consider when your goal is to get into your dream school?
Yeah. So like I said, the first question isn't what grades and test scores do I need? It's right. What do I love and how do I want to make an impact? And then what I would say is that's a very hard thing to answer on your own. So get a mentor. If your parent is a good partner with you, fantastic. But I know a lot of teens whose parents they just there's too much difference at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Teens are just trying to distinguish themselves and don't want to be connected to the parents, so that sometimes it doesn't work. In that case, that's where you really need that person who's sort of neutral, who can say, be your cheerleader, and not just your cheerleader, because your best friend can be your cheerleader, but also your strategist. Like, okay, you want to do this thing, what steps do we need to do to actually make this happen? Because a lot of us can have good ideas. The difference between those who get into these top schools and those who get waitlisted are the kids who have gone out and done something with their interests and their skills and their talents, and not just channeled that into study.
Definitely. Yeah. Really good points here. Now let's turn the table. What's one myth that parents and students need to know about the college admissions process?
Well, I mean, it comes back to the grades, you know. So many, I taught the SAT for a long time, and so parents were always so worried, and kids too, worried about the SAT and getting the highest score, absolutely. And they would, you know, the kid would get, like, let's say 2230 on the test, and they'd say, oh, no, we got to take this again. And they would spend so much time studying for these standardized tests, but there's really not a lot of usefulness in studying over and over and over again for these standardized tests. Once you're at a 2230 or whatever, you're not going to improve that much, right? If you're not one of those kids who's automatically scoring a 2230 the first time you take it without trying, you're probably not going to get a 2400. I'm not saying you can't, but the chances are you're probably just going to be a strong kid with a strong score, but it's not going to be perfect. And you don't even need perfection. It's so much more important to focus on being interesting and on doing something that you love and that distinguishes you than spending all this time on the studying piece. I'm not saying don't put the effort in or don't try at all. I'm definitely not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying don't get sucked into that myth of thinking that the more you study for your SAT or your ACT, the better your score will be and the more it will pay off. No, that's wasted time where you could be putting that energy into making someone else's life better, and then you could go write an essay about how lit up you were and how you just decided to ditch the SAT tutoring. The college admissions people like that because there's a lot of people out there who are doing the perfection model, and it's not just that. For me, it's not just that kids don't get into their top choice school when they fixate on this. It's the level of stress I see in these kids that really, really concerns me.
Maybe they'll drop out once they get in after freshman year. They're just so stressed out.
And there's a lot of research out there that when we push kids into a very high-performing school that they may not be ready for, whether that's intellectually or emotionally or whatever, it can actually be very, very damaging to their entire career. Because if their experience of going out into the world is to be in the lower half of the class and to be the tiny fish, in the big pond, they feel lost, they don't feel empowered. A lot of kids can end up feeling so much more empowered by being the big fish in the small pond, and then they rocket themselves from there. There's a lot of research out there. I was really kind of stunned when I read about it. Actually, this was in Malcolm Gladwell's recent book, David and Goliath. He talks a lot about this, that going to a big name school is not always the best thing. So that's another myth, I would say, is that be thoughtful and mindful about whether these are really the right places for you to apply. Don't just apply because of the name. Apply because it's the right program for you.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of research out there too that says it doesn't matter as much where you go for your undergraduate. It matters far more where you do your graduate program. Now, as a college consultant, that's probably not such a smart thing for me to say, business-wise, but I'm here to support my students, not to bully them into schools and just be another form of stress. That became my biggest mission 4 years ago when I saw these kids were not getting. All of them weren't getting into their top choice schools because the level of stress was astonishing. It was so worrisome to me. And I thought, not only is it not working, but they're completely stressed out. And then I don't think that you just go into college and beyond and unlearn that stress. I think what you learn is that success equals stress. I don't think it's something you just unlearn. So my whole goal is to say, let's do this in a way that's fun, that makes an impact and makes the world a better place, because it's more effective and you don't have to get stressed out. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. Definitely. So you're hitting so many good points here. Now, what kinds of new projects are you working on now? I know you already talked a little bit about your mastermind and the Dream School project. Is there a couple others?
Well, I'm working on a fast track college app program, and I have I've hired some really great college application specialists to work with me so that I can work with more students, because I've been getting so many requests for kids to work with me, and I just can't work with everyone. And not everyone is trying to go to a Harvard or a Stanford kind of school, and they don't need the really intensive kind of support with the essays. Maybe they just need a strong essay and a couple of supplemental essays. So the fast track program, that's what that's set up to do, is to work with my team, and they get to work with me as well to finalize the essays. I'm really excited about that new program because I think it's going to give an opportunity for a lot of students to get some support without having to be in that high stress, like I can only get support if I'm applying to 10 schools and they're all in the Ivy League and Stanford or whatever. No, I really wanted to kind of provide a place for as many students to articulate their voice. And I always say to anyone who's looking to work with me that this isn't just about writing a collection of essays when students work with me and my team. It's much more about getting to know who you are and building your confidence so that you appreciate what you're offering the college. It's not just it's not like we're just spinning your story. It's who are you really? What are you contributing? And I've had so many students work with me who say, oh my God, I had no idea that was my story. And that's a beautiful experience to walk into college thinking, I know who I am and I know what I'm offering. And this is an opportunity, the college applications are an opportunity to really do that deep self-reflection that most kids don't have a chance to do. They're so busy with their applications and their academics and their extracurriculars, and they're not used to answering these questions about themselves. Like I'll say, what are your best qualities? And students are like, deer in the headlights. So I've learned to ask different kinds of questions so that they don't feel put on the spot. But that's ultimately what we're doing, is helping them kind of pull that out. What are your best qualities? And so that by the time we're done, they have this really clear sense of, wow, I'm a connector, or I have this vision to, support other people in articulating their voices. I'm just thinking of all the students I'm working with now, or I want to do research and create this new kind of lab coat, that will be more protective and breathable. And these are all students I'm working with right now. And it's really exciting to see how it's kind of like a spark goes off when I work with them, like, oh, that's what I am offering. Okay. And that's going to take them way beyond the college applications, right? When you really know what your value is and what you're offering.
Yeah, and motivate you to, keep on trucking
keep
through.
Going and building on it. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So, Elizabeth, how do we find you? What's the best way to work with you and find you?
Sure. Well, the best way is to find me through my website, elizabethdankoski.com. And you can easily send me a note through my website there. I have lots of information there about my programs. As I mentioned, the information about the Dream School project, that will be up very soon. And the doors will be opening for that early next year in 2016. So I'm really looking forward to getting a lot more students involved and helping them build these projects in a way that I think that they just don't get an opportunity to do in school.
Amazing. So the bridge from adolescence to young adulthood is a huge transition. It's it can be kind of a daunting time for a young student. So you've been there. And you're a mentor, so I was wondering if you can give a few pieces of advice to a teen listening to us today, watching us.
Yeah, it's great. Well, every teen is different. Every teen that I work with is different, and so I always start by just wanting to find out. My first question is always, what do you like? What are you interested in? I always want to know that first. So if you're out there just trying to figure out how to navigate these waters of high school and getting into college, the first question isn't, what are my grades? The first question you want to be is, what do I care about? What do I like? What's interesting to me? Because I talked to a kid last March who ended up is going to be joining the Dream School project when it opens next year, and we're doing some private work together now as well. And when I first talked to him, I said, "What do you love?" And he was like, I don't like anything. He's like, I don't even like video games. He was just kind of like, he wanted me to know that like nothing was interesting. And then we started talking, we kept talking a little bit more, and then he was like, well, I like wrestling, and maybe I like robotics, and maybe I want to be a personal trainer. And I was like, okay, come on. And I just paid attention to everything he was telling me, and I started to say, okay, let's start to weave this. So I reached out to a roboticist. He's in Mountain View, California. So I reached out to a roboticist out there who runs a lot of workshops, because this student wasn't sure he could get involved in his robotics team because of his wrestling schedule. And I said, come on, let's get you connected. Let's find out where you can start plugging in and learning some of this, and not just from your home, but with other people. And I don't think he would have thought to even do that. So
that's amazing.
So part of it is thinking, okay, what do I like? And then part of it is also, what teacher, what adult in my life, what older person can I turn to who might be able to help me think bigger about my ideas? And so for example, and I also said, so this student I'm working with is really interested in robotics. I said, I also want to see you getting out there and helping others, because I think that's a really empowering thing. And he was like, do I have to? I said, well, no, of course you don't have to, but this is about ultimately helping you feel confident about how you can bring your skills to the world. And I asked him, what would you like to do? And because I wasn't about to tell him, you should go volunteer at XYZ, because then I'm just another adult telling him he's got to do it. He's not going to feel motivated by that. And he was like, well, maybe I want to be a personal trainer. I'm like, okay, I'm going to connect you with my trainer. So I connected them over email, and they've been going back and forth, talking about questions.
Fantastic.
And, this is a kid who I think he would feel very, very lost for a long time. And he said to me when we talked in March, he's like, I just don't get the point. Like, why do I have to do all this stuff? College feels so far away. At that point he was a sophomore. And he's like, it just feels so far away. What is the point? And I was like, I get it. I wasn't going to tell him anything different, because how could I possibly help him? How could he possibly trust me if I'm like, well, you just got to buckle down and stop being lazy, or whatever people say.
He's heard that.
Yeah, right? How many times? And does it help? No. So, and I see such a difference between when I talked to him in March and when I've been working with him this summer. He's actually he's like, I think I want to join the robotics team. I'm like, are you serious? That's so great. And he's talking about the personal training. He's, I forget what else he's working on. So the robotics piece is really big, but I'm really helping him to think in a bigger way. And I feel like that's the message I want to say to students, is that life is so much bigger than what it's made to look like, which is, it makes it look like it's just about the grades and the test scores. And you know what? It's not. It's about what can you contribute and where can you light up with just total happiness and joy that you can bring your gifts and your skills to other people. And I mean, I think a lot of kids don't get that experience. They're sort of forced into doing a lot of volunteering because it's required by the school.
Required, yeah.
So it's like an obligation. They just go and they're like, hand out whatever, they got to do. But there's no sense of like ownership in it, or I got to make that decision, or I want to do this.
Right.
And so I'm always asking, what do you want to do? Because I don't think anyone's really asking that question in the schools. Certainly not. It's just, you got to do it. Give me the homework and get your grades, right? And so I just think that this is a better approach all around for a happier life, and also to be more successful in the application process. So to me, it's win-win.
That's amazing. Before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? We covered a lot.
When I get talking about this, I could just go on and on for so long. But I feel like the heart of what I said is really just this idea of finding what you love and following that, and finding someone to partner with so that it doesn't just stay an idea in your head. Because when you're a teen, even when you're an adult, you don't know necessarily the next steps to take. You might have lots of ideas, but how do you execute them? And the more support you can have in executing the ideas that you've got, the more empowering it is. And I would say start small. You don't have to go out and create a nonprofit with Sandra Day O'Connor. No, you don't. Just start small. Do something little that is meaningful to you and to someone else. And then it can build from there. And the earlier you start this in high school, the more successful you'll be, both in your own just personal experience of high school and happiness, and ultimately in getting into a good school, the right school for you, and beyond.
Wow, this is enlightening. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Appreciate your time.
Such a great pleasure to be here.
All right, great. And this wraps up our show today with college admissions coach and founder of the Dream School Project, Elizabeth Dankoski. To learn more about Elizabeth's amazing work mentoring and coaching teens, go to her website, www.elizabethdankoski.com. That's ElizabethDankoski.com. Make sure to rewind and listen to episode number 82 with Joan Casey on how to thrive in college. And to access podcast number 94 with Elizabeth, as well as all of our podcasts, go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast. And make sure to be on the lookout for our next podcast episode. It'll be number 95, our next tutoring tips episode. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.